It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this session, Alice Korngold. Alice has trained and placed several hundred corporate executives on NGO and nonprofit boards since the early 1990s. She's also the author of several books, including A Better World, Inc., which was released earlier this year, and Leveraging Goodwill. We encourage you to check those both out. For the past 25 years, Alice has been providing global corporations and NGOs with advisory services in CSR, sustainability, corporate NGO partnerships, and corporate governance. Last year, Alice was named to Fast Company's list of the 25 smartest women on Twitter and Guardian Sustainable Business's top 30 most influential sustainability voices in America. Alice, we're so happy to have you here, and I'll turn it over to you to get started.
Thank you, Allison. Oh, can I have the mic, please? Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here. And is Courtney still in the room? I just want to thank her. Thank you so much for helping us prepare, and to the CECP team. This is a fabulous conference, as it is every year. It just gets bigger, although I know you try to keep it selective. And to a fabulous panel. I think you're in for a treat this morning. Let me first get a sense of the audience here in terms of how many of you here are responsible for board matching programs at your companies? Oh, wow, okay. And how many of you serve on nonprofit boards? Oh, incredible. Okay. And let me get a sense, too, of how many of your programs are domestic versus international. So how many are domestic only, please? And how many are international? Interesting. Okay. Really cool. Thank you. Well, actually, CECP did a study, and they found that 47% of programs are domestic and 22% are international. So I think in this room, more are domestic. So as you know from the program, what we're going to talk about today are a few things. So starting sort of from the top, we're going to talk about how to make sure your program helps your board, how to ensure that your board matching program really accomplishes the company's mission and goals at the highest level. Then, I put them on the easel too, how to ensure that your board matching program is making sure that the candidates, your board candidates, have a rewarding and productive experience. How to make sure that the nonprofits are benefiting in terms of gaining quality, experienced board members that meet their needs. How to make sure that the community, you're building stronger communities through your programs, and ultimately, how to make sure that you're getting the best return on investment in terms of achieving your company's goals and building a better world through measurable results. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. We have a fabulous panel for this discussion. We have Grace Koo, who's Managing Director at Credit Suisse. She's been on the Credit Suisse Americas Foundation Board for 10 years. She also serves on a number of boards. She's on the board of City Harvest, and you'll hear in a minute, we also have the Executive Director of City Harvest. She co-chairs the Working Mothers Network, and she also served for a number of years on the Madison Square Park Conservancy. We also have Jilly Stevens here in the middle, who's Executive Director of City Harvest for the past 8 years and has led the organization through some very important years of growth. They deliver millions of pounds of food in high areas of need. They provide education in communities for related to nutrition and provide disaster relief. They started a major capital campaign in 2012, and they're halfway to their goals for doubling the impact of their services. And their funding comes from companies, individuals, and government, and all of the food is contributed, of course. And our third panelist, I've had the honor of working with for a number of years. She's served in senior corporate positions for her entire career at Avon and at Union Carbide, finishing it off with a senior position at a very major national nonprofit that we'll hear a little bit about, but most importantly relevant to this discussion today. She stepped into the position of chair of the board for services for the underserved during a difficult time for the organization. The CEO is outstanding. This is an $80 million social services organization serving New York. 90 million, thank you. The board, as of 8 years ago, was troubled, and Carolyn stepped up to chair and virtually transformed the board. It was very brave, and she handled it with such grace and dignity, and it is now an extraordinary, outstanding board. So we'll hear a little bit about that. She also serves on the board of Corporation for Supportive Housing, which funds supportive housing. This is to develop affordable permanent housing for people at risk of homelessness to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars in communities throughout the country. So we have a tremendous panel today. Let me mention just a couple things to set the stage for the discussion. So again, my approach to my sort of concepts for this is, one, the board matching program has to very clearly help the company achieve its goals for growth, profits, et cetera. And for each company, that's distinctively different. Second, board matching, of course, as you all know because you do it, the person who goes on a board, they have to be in love with that board and that organization. And I'm seeing nodding. Be a very purposeful, conscious choice, going in with their eyes wide open, not just what the organization does, but what are the challenges and how can they be useful? And the nonprofit has to be in love with that candidate, really excited that this person is going to add value. And when that's the case, most candidates actually wind up in leadership positions, because when the question is asked, well, who will help with this, who will help with that? If a candidate really loves what they're doing, they're going to, oh, I will, and they wind up in leadership positions. The worst thing possible is the candidate is in their first board meeting or two and says, oh, this is not what I had in mind. We want to avoid that. It's not good for the candidate, the company, or the nonprofit. So how do you make a match to avoid that? And how do you prepare people so that they know how to be a good board member? And one more thing, and that is about building better boards and preparation for board members. My approach with boards is that the role of a board, just compliance is necessary. If the board doesn't watch that, then you can get in serious trouble. But if all you do is compliance, you don't get the organization anywhere. It doesn't advance the ball. So the best is when a board can look back 3 or 4 years hence and say, look what we accomplished. So when I work with boards, and what I advise business people who go on boards is work with, the board ideally should be having conversation with the CEO to say, where do we envision this organization in the next several years? What's the greater potential? What's possible? And then that's meaningless unless you create the revenue model to achieve success. And with nonprofits, that can be a mix of fees for services, government, corporate philanthropy, individual, foundation. And so it's looking at the opportunities and threats there. And then based on that, saying, okay, what's the role of the board in achieving, maximizing success? And what are our expectations of individuals? How many people will it take? What expertise and relationships do we need? What do we have on this board? So, and what do we need? And do we need to celebrate and thank some people on the board who helped us get to where we are now, but maybe aren't the right people to get us where we're going with our vision and the revenue model going forward? And then what are the committees that will help us do our work? What's the board agenda so that we can focus on the board's work and monitor what we're doing and how we're getting where we're going? And who's the right leadership to lead us as a board in fulfilling our responsibilities? And not just the board chair, but the whole cadre of leadership. So very purposeful and thoughtful, so that the board is really productive and in a few years hence really does accomplish what they've set out to do. So with that basic approach, let me turn to the panel. I have questions to get the ball rolling with panelists. They have amazing experience, and to acquaint you with the panel. And then we're going to turn it over to the audience for discussion and end by noon for a fabulous lunch. So let me first start with Grace, who, as I said, has served on Credit Suisse's foundation board and also serves on a number of boards herself. So what steps, Grace, does Credit Suisse, does the foundation board take to ensure that your funding and philanthropy strategy is aligned with what the company is trying to accomplish?
Well, I think the company's goals are relatively straightforward, and it's to be profitable and responsible. And on the topic of responsibility, I think everyone will acknowledge that culture is the glue that brings a company together. It's the secret sauce that can enable employees to bring the best to work every day. And to that end, our corporate citizenship program really focuses on 3 pillars, and that's microfinance, education, and employee engagement. And employee engagement for us means a lot of different things, but where board matching comes in, we feel it's the most effective way to deliver skills-based volunteerism. I think most people in the room will acknowledge that hands-on volunteerism is fulfilling in the moment. It could be fleeting, but if you can get somebody on a board who has a sustainable vision to actually change the fabric of an organization or change the strategy and help grow the organization, there's a more sustainable impact. And so at Credit Suisse, we believe that really focusing on board matching helps serve the greater purpose of becoming a more responsible bank, being a more responsible organization to our community.
Thank you. And how do you prepare candidates to ensure that it's productive and rewarding experience?
I think it's like any matching, whether it's your partner in life or whether it's finding your job. You have to do your due diligence. We understand that our employees may have a lot of goodwill, but they may be naive. So education for us is first and foremost the most important thing to make sure that they really understand what it takes to be on a board. And that could mean describing what a give and get looks like. And I think people understand that there's money involved, but how many of them really understand that there is a real financial responsibility? I think a number of junior folks who may join smaller organizations may not understand that there's a fiduciary responsibility to a board. That could be jarring to someone. And so to even educate people that these are the core responsibilities of a board member is important. And so we encourage the education process, and it's a program that we started in late 2009. We probably processed over 700, 800 people through the program and placed about 100 people on boards. Another element that's made us successful, I think, in this regard is we've worked with board matching organizations like Robin Hood and United Way. And it's the opportunity for both sides to say maybe this isn't the right match or this is the right match, so that there's some exploration and dating, if you will, before the commitment is made.
Excellent. That's really impressive. And I think with the financial expectation, that's really helpful for people to understand. So that's really impressive. Jilly, your organization has achieved tremendous success under your leadership. What has been the role of the board in accomplishing success, if you can describe that, please?
Thank you. So the role of the board, as it should be with every nonprofit, has been critical. And certainly when we look at the significant growth we've had over the last several years, the board really was there doing their job, which is setting strategic direction, working very closely with the senior management of City Harvest, and making sure that we have very clear goals for the next 5 years, our strategic plan. They're staying close to us when it comes to targets and what we're going to measure success against with the strategic plan. And then, Alice, as you touched on earlier, they're critical when it comes to fundraising, not only for our day in, day out operational needs, but we have a fundraising campaign going on at the moment in support of the strategic plan. So board is very important there too. What we've experienced at City Harvest in the 8 years that I've been in this position at City Harvest is really an evolution of the board. As the organization has grown, so has the board evolved, and that's been fascinating. And I really take my hat off to the City Harvest board and chair that they've been able to do this and recognize that there is an evolution. And in fact, we captured that this year in a white paper for the governance committee that really laid out, to your point earlier, the governance body that we need 5 years from now.
Wow, that's impressive. That's not available online, I assume.
I don't see any reason we can't make it available.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah. And can you give us an example of a board member too who's played a particularly meaningful, helpful role, so that we can, get a sense of what's a good board member look like?
Well, knowing that you should never call out one person, and we have a board of I think 42 at the moment, but I'm sure Grace as a board member would agree. Jim Coleman, who's the board chair, really is an incredible board member. He is in large part the reason why we've been able to evolve as a board. He has very strong leadership. He just knows what the balance is between being a great board member and not getting too involved, but being just involved. He knows the operations of the organization inside and out, and I couldn't ask for a better partner. So that board chair role, I think, is also a critical role for any executive director or CEO and the board. It's a pivotal link.
Yes, that's a great segue, and I think the CEO is critical, but the board chair is the most important. And you can have a great board, but without the right board chair, it doesn't all come together. And as a partner for the CEO, which is a great segue to Carolyn. I witnessed the transformation that she led as board chair and stepped up when things were really dicey. The CEO is an extraordinary CEO for many, many years at Services for the Underserved, which provides multiple services. Carolyn can say a little bit more about that. Veteran services, people with mental and physical disabilities, all ages. They have many, many residential sites. It's a very complicated organization. But the board was troubled in many ways, and no one would come onto that board. And Carolyn agreed to become chair and transformed it with, as I said, such grace, but it was tough lifting. So Carolyn, I'm sure we've all seen boards, maybe not in such duress, but how'd you do it? Tell us.
I think I want, can you hear me all right?
Is it on? Maybe closer to your. Oh, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks, Julie.
Well, I guess I want to start with what was triggering,
Closer.
what was triggering the need for me to take on what I consider a difficult role of turning around or transforming a board that had a mix of people who had been on a long time. Some board members we had recruited, and I will be first to say we hadn't done a really good job of making sure they understood the expectations and we were clear about our own expectations. And also making sure more than anything that who you bring on can collaborate well with the other board members and can actually be engaged, juggle time, juggle your expertise, but also work very well with other board members. One of the things that I found in taking the board chair was that we had a board that was stuck pretty much in fiduciary. Fiduciary is critical, but at the same time, a board has to also be strategic, think strategically, and also engage in generative discussions, because one of the things we found with the funding environment was changing dramatically. So that was going to have a major challenge to the organization, which was heavily funded by government resources. Well, we had board members who would say, but we don't have to worry about that. Sustainability isn't much of an issue, so why do we need to do more to help the CEO to generate resources for the organization? And at the same time, we had board members who were very risk adverse. Well, from my perspective, partnering with the CEO, we had to make sure the board understood that sustainability was critical. So we engaged external expertise because we knew this was going to be difficult, and so you wanted an independent viewpoint so that whoever's going to be working with us could help to facilitate discussion with the board as a whole to understand it is about sustainability, it is about stepping up and being more involved in working with the CEO to generate resources for the board. But then we started getting clashes. It was beginning to fall apart, and we realized that there were some board members who were not going to adjust to the change, who were not going to play by the rules. So at that point, I had one-on-one conversations with board members who I thought were disruptive, which was not an easy thing to do, to figure out how to have those conversations. had the one-on-ones, and in some cases, I had to ask the board members to find a reason to leave, or they were too busy, whatever it took to leave the board so that we could build a stronger board and bring in board members who could fill gaps that we had, determined that we had on the board. So as you can imagine, it was not an easy one-on-one conversation. It was not easy, but the board members who were engaged in moving on, becoming a better board, for me to step up and take those kinds of actions with them, be having support in the background. An excellent CEO deserves to have an excellent board to help work with her, or in this case, her, to drive the organization. And the board of the future has to be more involved in generating resources and stepping up to the plate to be innovative in the thinking and generating ideas. It's a different board than what it used to be, and have to be more risk-taking in order to drive change.
And I wonder, Jill, if you had a similar experience, but ultimately someone does, the board chair, ideally, or chair of governance, has to have the one-on-one conversations. Jilly, I don't know if you have had that experience with your board chair or someone else who does that.
It's come up for us infrequently. The board, we eliminated limits to terms a few years ago, so we have terms.
You have
Is
term
this on?
limits.
We don't have limits to them, so we
Okay.
have terms, 3-year terms, and they can be renewed. Oftentimes what we see is as the board has evolved over, let's say, the 6 years, it might not be a spot that the board member wants to fill anymore, is in a position to fill anymore. Perhaps the give-get or the expectations are beyond their reach. We have somebody recently who's just become busier at work. And that's a conversation that the board of the chairman of the board will have, usually when the term is up. It's not something I think that's ever happened midterm.
Most of you are on nonprofit boards. Let me ask for a vote of how many. So every board, of course, has terms, often 3 years. The question is whether you're for or against term limits. Often that's after 2-3-year terms that you can no longer continue. Maybe you need to take a 1-year hiatus if the board wants you back. But so how many of you, I'm going to ask for term limits and against. So how many of you are for term limits? Wow. And how many of you are against term limits? Wow, interesting. Okay. Yes.
I'm on a lot of boards, and it depends on.
I'm sorry. Do you want to stand? Oh, thank you. Can you introduce
Hello,
yourself?
yes, I'm Nancy Rapstanek-Nichols from Interpublic Group. I'm on a lot of nonprofit boards, and I don't think there's a straight answer to that question. It depends on the size of the board, the makeup of the board, the mission, the age of the board, et cetera, et cetera. And I could have raised my hand for both, depending on which board was in question.
Yeah, very.
Can I just say a little bit more about City Harvest? I would say we have a board of about 40. We see some churn every year. So we're saying goodbye to 5 great board members. One's relocated to London.
Yep.
There are good reasons, and we're bringing on more to take their spots. It was just nerve-wracking every year to sort of say goodbye to a really great board member and say, see you in a year, and not feel certain they would be back. It didn't, we felt, benefit the organization to say goodbye.
I'll add to that in that we add an evaluation process each year. So the notion that you need to end a term or end someone's board membership just because they've hit their time limit, we felt that we would have this discontinuous
Yes.
board that was unnecessary, and to have that continuity and perfectly well-functioning board members who are great contributors could stay as long as they served that purpose, and we would evaluate them each year. And so, in short, we get a report card that reminds us of things like board meetings and committee meetings and contributions. And it sort of speaks for itself. Did you really do the work that you were required to do over the last 12 months?
The couple of things that happened when we were transitioning the board, we had surveyed the whole board, where we provided input and we did individual surveys. And then we took those statistics and looked at what did we need to have to make sure that board members were actually engaged on an annual basis. So we, in addition, we also established working agreements so that we can say what it is that we are going to agree to do on an annual basis, and so that we can, at the end of the year, be able to go back and have these individual evaluations and then actually evaluate the board as a whole as to how we met our objectives for the year. So it became a more formalized process. So board members are coming on to provide input, support, but we're also going to measure, and we do that on an annual basis.
Wonderful, thank you. Great comments, and thank you for your comments as well. Nancy? Yeah, thank you. Let me get questions and comments from the audience. You've got a lot of experience in here. Thank you. Is there someone with, is there an extra mic, maybe? Thank you, terrific. A question over there, thank you.
All around, yeah.
First, I want to thank all of you. Oh, pretty loud.
And can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Dan McNeil. I work for Prudential. I am a part of the corporate engagement department as a relationship manager. And my question was, can maybe all of you speak about the importance of creating boards that are more culturally, ethnically, and gender diverse? And I asked that because one of the things that our nonprofit partners were literally screaming for was more diversity on their boards. They were overwhelmingly white males 50 to 60 years of age, and they really wanted to have boards that were more reflective of the individuals that they served in their respective communities.
So I can
Great
start
question.
with the microphone. It's something our governance committee has paid very close attention to for the last several years. And it's not easy, but it's not something you can ever take your eye off of. And we, I think we're in a pretty good space when it comes to all sorts of diversity. It's something we'll continue to work on. The other area addressed in this governance white paper that I mentioned earlier is, how do we ensure the voice of authenticity on the board? How do we ensure that the people we're representing in the poorest neighborhoods of New York City have their voice heard in the boardroom? And we struggled with that. We talked to a lot of people. Where we ended up is not to set up a two-tiered board. That doesn't feel good for anybody in the other tier. And so we're working to find other ways to get that voice into the boardroom through advisory committees. And so that's something we're in the middle of right now. But it's not something any of us should shy away from, as hard as it is.
Hold it close enough. Not a great mic. Yes. We work very hard to make sure that we have diversity, and that could be thinking people, age, and the way that we did that was to work with the governance committee to set up a structure where we have an advisory committee, we have what we call the main or parent board, and because the organization is so complex, we wanted to drive more of the monitoring and decision-making at another level, so we have affiliate boards. And in addition, because we wanted to gauge what we call emerging leaders that could move into these other boards, we set up a Young Leaders Council where we brought in board members and use it as a place to drive members who learn and then can progress. And we also have a volunteer group. So we have multiple levels that we try to look across the board. What do we need to have in terms of diversity? And then how do we pool the talent in such a way that we can pull across different boards to make sure we're getting different voices and deal with diversity in multiple ways. But it's something that we pay very close attention to. So in board matching, that's one of the things we have to look very carefully at when we're doing board matching. How do we look within, let's say, corporations to see if they're also looking at diversity for us when we're trying to match with the nonprofits?
Did you want to answer? Dan, I've worked with boards for 25 years. and I feel this way too about for-profit boards. I'm really passionate about this. I think candidates are there. This is not an issue. It's about who and where you network. Board members and the CEO and the senior team. The candidates are there. I meet them, I see them, I know them. And when I facilitate board retreats, the difference between a board with people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives and a more homogeneous board, what the board can imagine and envision is so different, and the conversation is so different, and what's possible is so different. And it's not just, the communities you serve now, it's what you can imagine what's possible. And it's the organization's better off in terms of what it imagines, what it accomplishes, its revenue model, and the community's better off. So I just urge you all to make this a major priority. I don't think it's a challenge in New York City for sure. Maybe in some communities. I can see it in some communities. I'm tempted to name names, but I'm not going to. Anyhow, so thank you for raising that, Dan. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your comments. Yes, there's a question back there. I'm sorry. And then another one. You're in my line of sight, so.
Hi, Ray Johnson, HSBC. Kind of building on this point, I have 3 recent examples where the nonprofit has said to me, thank you for bringing someone forward, but they're not senior enough. We want the person who's one down from your CEO. And so they've been quite blunt about that. So I'm curious, and I'm transferring from Chicago to New York. So I'm trying to figure out, is this a New York thing? Is this an anomaly? Are you looking for not just diversity, but talent from senior executives who aren't one down, but maybe 2 or 3 down that can still contribute?
We've actually had that as an issue in a couple of situations. What we try to do, depending on who we're looking at, how busy is that person, and are they able to juggle time, and also will they fit culturally with the rest of the board in terms of working together. We tend to use CEO levels in the boards I work on, maybe on advisory level. And then we try to go deeper in the organization, because sometimes those are the ones who are able to give you more in-depth conversations and discussion. And then we have the ability to position them across multiple boards or sub-boards. So it's a question of how best to use within the organization and where they will fit better, because you have to have an overall culture feel to the board itself.
I would echo that, which was, I think right on point. City Harvest is very specific about what we're looking for in board members. We're clear about what the give-get is, what the expectations are in terms of attendance. I would say if the executive can meet those requirements and there is a good fit, we do spend time, or the chairman of the board and the chair of the governance committee spends time with prospective board members. Then we move ahead. We haven't been that specific. We're just looking for great board members. And I would echo the point that, as you go down through the organization, we're perhaps going to have a greater match with people who bring a certain skill set that we need as we grow. So we're very interested in exploring those things.
Thank you. Great questions. Yes, the woman in the back, please.
So hi, I'm Samantha Hennessy with Google, and related to both of those questions, we just recently launched in New York a pilot to match young professionals to boards, and it's been a great experience, but what we found is that matching is very high touch, and I was wondering if there are any extra tools that you guys know about to make this more scalable. Are you using partners to do your matching? Are you doing interviews? Are you doing questionnaires? How do we make these opportunities available to more people?
So we've used a consultant for many years who's well-versed in sort of teaching our employees what it takes to be an effective board member. And in addition to that, we usually invite someone from our foundation board to speak from personal experience to sort of augment the conversation. And I think using that consultant has made it scalable. I think it's tough for us to do that in-house, and this person's expertise is that. That's probably one good example where you can use someone whose expertise as a consultant can come in and help. In addition, you know, we're working with Robinhood and United Way. They're doing a lot of the heavy lifting with the actual matching. You know, without them, I think it would be very difficult for our staff to sort of do that, pretty much impossible to do that for the 700 people that we've invited to be part of these classes. So the right partnerships can make all the difference. That's how we've gotten our leverage.
Yes, question to
Hi, I'm Cheryl Cook from Allstate. I'm the manager of corporate giving. And I wanted to pick up on something that Google said. You said you had 700 people at your company sitting on boards. How does
Haven't gone through the program.
haven't gone through the program?
Right.
How does your company back you? Do they say, at your level of managing director, we're going to help you give so much money to City Harvest? Is it based on your title? Is it based on longevity? How do you make that decision? And when your board decided to expand and grow, did your company say we're going to kick that up a notch because we believe in you and the nonprofit board you sit on?
So at Credit Suisse, we've not made it so prescriptive as to number of years or size of organization, but we've recently embarked on a program where we will give $5,000 for every person that sits on a board, and that's regardless of title, length of service on a board. And we felt that it was important to take that extra step. Once you match an employee with the board, it's hard to just say we're here to just support you in words. You know, you need that financial support. So it was something that we hadn't, frankly, done ever. But we felt that since we have engaged all these employees, we owe it to them to now lend that monetary support. So this is relatively new for us, and we felt that $5,000 was the right level.
question in the front here, please.
My name's Diane Inglett with CenterPoint Energy. When you provide, Diane Inglett with CenterPoint Energy, when you provide the $5,000 to the employee for the board service, does it have to be a board that fits your certain focus areas, or can it be, you said it can be any board at all?
It's any board. I mean, we tried not to get too prescriptive for a lot of reasons. I mean, if only for administration, but we felt that if an employee is engaged and devoting that much time and energy to an organization of their choice, that it was important for us to back that individual.
Which goes to your goals, which were leadership development, employee engagement. So it depends on the goals of the program. Yeah.
We think we have about 200 employees actually on board. So the 700-800 number is the number of people who've gone through the training program.
Yeah. There were questions. Oh, you've got somebody there. Thank you.
Alicia Lee Master with Devon Energy. How do you, or is this a service that Robinhood or United Way provides, how do you track those individuals and their interests outside of your program? Because I'm assuming that your program is you've identified people that are high performers that you want to have these development opportunities, but you probably also have a lot of employees that are very passionate about certain causes and organizations that are serving on boards and doing great things. And if they're not part of your program, are you tracking them or not, and why and how?
So we do try to track as much outside, we call it outside interests, as possible. There's an in-house system that captures external activity. With respect to Robinhood and United Way, I mean, those are organizations that work with us to do the matchmaking. It's not to say that our employees can't go out and find matches on their own. It's just one way to sort of facilitate that final step. And your question about whether it's for a high-performing employee, we don't look at the employee's sort of performance ranking in the organization. Anyone is eligible to sign up for these classes, go through the few or several hours that it takes to really learn what it takes to be a board member. There's no screening of high potential employees or high performing employees. It's open to anyone.
Courtney asked me to point out to you the grid that's in front of each of you at your places. This is a tool that I've used for a number of years. It's actually also in my first book that's called Leveraging Goodwill, Strengthening Nonprofits by Engaging Businesses, which describes my process for training and placing corporate executives on nonprofit boards. And so I use this tool with candidates. So I find that most candidates have many different interests, and one of the things that's important to them, which I'm sure will resonate with you, is that they want to add value. And with this tool, it's a way to get a sense from them of the kind of role that they see themselves playing in a board. So on the horizontal axis, it looks at the quality of the board and the CEO, and on the vertical axis, it looks at the organization's potential impact. So the top right box is for someone who says, I really want to be on a board that's really high functioning, and I can help promote the organization, but I'm not going to really be able to participate on a board where it needs a lot of major work. On the bottom left, the other extreme, is someone who says, I'm a turnaround person, so give me something tough where we're trying to really help find the organization's way and reposition it, and the board and the staff might need rebuilding. And actually, I placed someone a long time ago on a board that needed that, and he helped merge them into a larger organization, and so rescued some very valuable community services. And it was actually, he's just become a dean of a law school, and he wants to integrate this kind of service into the curriculum. It was that meaningful of an experience for him. On the top left is for an organization that has high impact. It's a really strong, effective organization, but needs to have a stronger board and perhaps CEO. This could describe services for the underserved, actually, in terms of building a stronger board, but the organization is high impact. On the bottom right, this would be, I'm actually thinking of an organization I've worked with, an organization that actually has a really great board and CEO, but its mission could be becoming obsolete, and they need to rethink how do we become more relevant in today's environment. And that's, looking at the needs, looking at what they have to offer. So I often pose this question to candidates, do you have any thoughts about where you might fall in here? And it just helps me get a sense of the person, helps a conversation sometimes. I don't always use it. It depends on whether I need to help encourage the conversation in one way or another. And I also sometimes plot organizations on this and use this when I do board consulting and sort of diagnose an organization. So in case that's useful to you, Courtney asked me to share that. More questions? Yes, there's a gentleman there, and there's a woman then in the front. So you and then you. Thank you.
Hi, Eric Eckholt from Credit Suisse.
Hi, Eric.
Hi,
It's been a
good to
long
see you.
time.
Yeah, notwithstanding I'm from Credit Suisse, these are not planted questions. So question for Jilly and Carolyn about when you have someone that's presented to you as a candidate from a corporation, do you think about them differently than you might be if someone were to knock on your door, and whether or not you do, and let's say they join your board, do you cultivate them differently? Or are there things you think about differently, whether it be fundraising or friend raising or just things to help you that you might not be able to do with someone that comes in their individual capacity? And then for Grace, it's a question about, the title is benefiting your company and executives, and I'm curious your feelings about how this maybe has benefited you personally and Credit Suisse. Thank you.
So I would say, Credit Suisse notwithstanding, we haven't had that many corporations knocking on our door, although that is starting to change. We're starting to hear from the executive level of some big corporations who are starting to talk to us. And the opportunity we have through our governance committee is to begin thinking about what are the skills we need to bring in on the board. Certainly as we look again at that board that we need 3 to 5 years from now. Through our governance committee, we're developing a more targeted recruitment strategy. And so the hope is that timing works and we can have that developed as we're responding to these Not a tremendous amount, but certainly increasing number of corporations beginning to knock on the door, which I think is great, and I think is really a good testament to the organization City Harvest has become. It's become targeted by major donors, philanthropists, and now corporations who want to take a seat there.
We actually do more targeting. We spend a lot of time at the governance committee actually evaluating and looking at what's coming up in the future, what are our needs now. And so we try to use our networks and begin to start looking at where are the gaps. And then once we identify the gaps, then we start looking at how do we want to attract or go after certain people or work with organizations they may have the kind of expertise that we think we need. And that's because I think we've learned from not doing a really good job of understanding what you need and understanding what those gaps are going to be, not only now, but as we're going forward, then I think we end up in a situation where, again, we're not having these matches in terms of expectations, what our needs are, and it becomes difficult to sort of deal with those things. So we do a lot more targeting than we've ever done.
Let me ask you by show of hands again. It's going to be yes, no, with regard to your boards, to get a sense of how many of you are on boards where there's a clear statement of expectations of board members so that people know what your attendance requirements are, what your give-get is. So first, how many yes have a statement of expectations for the boards that you serve on, and how many no? Okay, so that really, that's a big change over the past 10 years. When I first started talking about that like 20 years ago, people were totally freaked out. So that's a really positive shift. Yeah, some laughter. Any comments on that?
I would say it's great to have the expectations, but not as many organizations have the scorecard. Which I'm
Yes.
finding that
Do you want to? Yeah. It's Lalita, that's what I thought. Okay, you're with Credit Suisse, and I know you had said yesterday you were with Acumen before that. So for anyone who didn't hear, Lalita said that many organizations have the expectations, but not necessarily the accountability, the scorecard. And that's, of course, really important, that annually the governance committee look at it, look at just a tracking sheet. And there's a sample actually in my first book, Leveraging Goodwill, to say, how is everybody doing? And I found it's very productive for board members who are not participating to have a one-on-one conversation and say, look, I know you really wanted to get engaged, but we haven't seen you participate at the level we hoped. What can we do? And I've found that sometimes people will say, well, I really meant to, but this happened and that happened, and I'm really going to next year, fine. Others will say, look, I just don't have the time. So people are relieved to have that conversation. And some people say, I'm not sure how to be useful, so can we talk about that? And then you can have a productive conversation. But, it's a grown-up conversation. And Carolyn's had, experience.
And I think as chair, I decided I wanted to do that so that it was a more comfortable conversation and a sensitive conversation with the board member. What's going on in the next year or what's been going on, it's what can you do more of or less of, or how do you want to translate how you're going to provide support to the board? And it changes over time. So I think by having those one-on-one conversations, it helps to set individual plans, and then I collect those individual plans, and then we publicize, our annual meeting, what are we going to do as a whole board in order to address the needs of the organization for board support. So it's trying to be sensitive. We're still trying to transform the board so that expectations are set, we evaluate them, and if you're going to be a board member, you have to be accountable for providing support to the organization. I mean, it is a responsibility.
Yes, somebody, Jilly, did you?
Well, I thought I'd take this opportunity to answer Eric's question since
Closer.
I've now been thinking about it for 5 minutes.
Mike.
What am I getting, personally getting out of the board experience? I guess it's really on two fronts, as Eric knows. I have 2 young children, so I don't have many hobbies outside of work and my family, so philanthropy is sort of it for me. the mission of City Harvest, delivering food to the hungry, is something that hits home in my family. My husband is a chef, and so he was involved in the restaurant community from very early days, working with City Harvest to have food rescued from his restaurant and delivered to our different agencies. And so it's been a personal fulfillment where I can bring my family together in the very little time we have outside of raising family and work to do good to our community. For the organization, it's meant that I can tie in all these parts of my world together. I mean, in February, I had this confluence of home, City Harvest, and clients come together in this client event that we did at the Institute of Culinary Education, where we had basically a Top Chef-like experience with our clients who had this client competition, and we did it to raise money for City Harvest. And I thought, this is sort of the nirvana of all the streams of my life, where I can bring in philanthropy, my bank, my employer, and help the community. And so, if we could find ways to leverage our personal network to make that fabric intertwined, that to me is the ultimate fulfillment of sort of bringing all the crossroads of my life together.
That's terrific. Thank you. Polly.
I'm Polly Morrow. I'm with Pitney Bowes, and we have a board placement program that works very well for us, and we do support our employees on those boards. If it's something they found themselves, we do matching, we do volunteer grants that are small, but then we do have corporate funds to help people that we have asked to serve on our nonprofit partners. So it helps us in a lot of ways. But I think the thing that we really need to strengthen is our board training, which is hard because we've got employees all over the place, and I'm just looking for best practices on how you've done it with partners, with webinars, or self-directed training, and I'd love to learn more about how other companies have addressed that challenge.
There's Lolita right there who runs our program. I can't say enough about this consultant. I think he's been great. His name escapes me. And running those programs regularly has been really helpful and sort of key to getting our employees educated, just that there's this basic understanding. We've not used technology or webinar. I don't think that's...
The training is very interactive and it's very case study based, and that's what really hooks people.
Right.
So we have taken it to 7 cities, and we have found that we need that in-person interaction.
And the Q&A afterwards, and having some board members there speaking about their personal experiences. I think we feel technology is a little too removed to have that chemistry in the room where you can really have interactive learning. But to have a facilitator, someone professional who does the actual teaching with the materials and can do it in a consistent way, session by session by session, has been valuable for us. And I guess we've been using the same person for the last 4 years, 4+ years.
Yeah.
Required for their training.
What is the timing required?
How long do they train for? Yeah. Lita, help me. How many hours? 2.5 hours. So, yeah, and the room is full. I mean, it's room typically this size. We have, table rounds like this, and we go through modules throughout those 2.5 hours, typically with some board members in the audience, and then we take Q&A. And so it's an intimate room, but, we probably fill it with 30 to 50 people each time.
And the trainings that I've done are anywhere from 90 minutes to a whole day, but in 90 minutes, it's always interactive and can accomplish a great deal. But one multinational corporation flew people in from all over the country and wanted a day, so it was just highly interactive and really great fun. But I agree that interactive is best. Yeah, and most groups are 35 to 50 people, but it varies, yeah, and it's great fun. Sometimes smaller seminar groups when it's follow-up, when people are in leadership positions and want to get into the nitty-gritty of that.
Well, we've
Yeah.
also invited only the most senior titles in the bank, so we've not opened it to the junior ranks. It's at our bank, it's really managing director and director level.
That's my experience as well.
With 2.5 hours for managing directors and directors, doesn't meet that specific time limit. But we have the United Way partnership, which is an
Yeah. No, my experience is only with very senior, yeah.
Could I also ask, and I'm Megan Bracken with KPMG, we don't necessarily have a very formal board matching program at this point, so I was wondering kind of what to take into consideration as we set one up, and also what resources are available out there.
Can I pass that to Lolita since she's our expert?
I think you have to understand what community you want to attract. So again, deciding who's the top talent, which specifically more senior people, and then just really understanding who the partners out there. There are quite a few partners, and leveraging them because we all don't have that kind of staffing to do the high touch that's required.
Let me mention too, Pixera Global. I don't know how many of you work with Pixera Global. I know Samantha does from Google. I see another raised hand, but I'm going to be working with them going forward with multinational corporations that want to expand their national programs to international board matching programs. So we're going to work together on that. Yes, and there's a question here.
Hi, I'm Laura James from UPS, and I just wanted to make a comment on an earlier remark that was made regarding board matching in New York City. So here we get a lot of autonomy with what we can do with foundation funds on a local level. And I've found, and I only deal with really everything east of the Mississippi, that the New York City area has some of the highest give-get expectations. So we do tell employees that when we specifically, recommend that they join a board for their development as part of their career development plan, we do give them support because in this area, the give-get tends to be an expectation of starting at $10,000 to $15,000 for the most high-profile boards. So I don't know if it's a New York thing because of our proximity to the financial district, but there is an expectation here I don't see in the other parts of the country. Then my question to the panel is really on the number 5, like what have you seen both on the nonprofit end and on the company end that best demonstrated how organizations have been able to yield measurable results from their participation on a nonprofit board?
Thank you.
Since I'm the only one at a corporation, I guess I'll answer that question. We like to measure what we can. We're a bank, after all. So we do capture data as simple as hours, types of activities. It's hard to just take that and obviously there's sort of the tangible that you can get out of whatever metrics you can derive out of the activities that your employees engage in, and then there's sort of the intangible and these client invitations to events, volunteer activities that you could do with your business. So we, at the foundation level, we do capture as much data as possible. It's a little open-ended what we can do with that. I mean, we realize that our impact is not always measurable in units that we can describe. So I don't know if I've really answered your question.
Yeah.
It's not easy to put a metric on it, but also from the nonprofit side, I'd be interested to hear what have you seen being rewarding for those individuals, for their organizations who represent a corporation on your boards. What has that experience done for their organization just from your observation?
And thank you. That's going to be the last question. We'll
Okay.
answer that, and then I'm going to ask each panelist for a final comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm probably not going to segregate corporations from the answer, so take from it what you will. But I think for all board members, they're looking to know that there's some impact to the investment of their time and their money and so on. At City Harvest, the way we've measured impact has evolved over the years. So we're I think improving every year about the kind of reports we're producing and keeping our board members as well as our donors in general really up to date on what impact we're seeing. And that now goes beyond the immediate impact of the food rescue and making sure that every pound of food that's going to go to waste today is on somebody's table this evening, somebody who's hungry. That's really important. That's the core of what we do day in, day out. As our programming has evolved, and now we're investing in some very complex programming that's quite cutting edge in the area of diet-related disease and where it meets hunger in low-income neighborhoods. We've invested heavily in an evaluation team that's quite unusual. We're 2 years into that work, so we have our baseline established. I hope by August we'll have the results to begin to measure against that and begin to demonstrate to, as I said, all of our constituency, but including board members, whether they're from corporate or whatever their background is, so they can know what the impact is of our work. And I'm hoping that that's going to be especially helpful to those board members who are from corporations. That's information that you can take right back in to your corporation, to the boardroom there, to the foundation, and let them know what the impact is of the support.
One of the things we haven't talked about is a value that comes through pro bono support, an in-kind that has tremendous value for the nonprofit, but even on the corporate side, it has great value. And the individuals who actually link those resources together get personal satisfaction. They also get sometimes a leg up in their organization because they have been able to make those kinds of links. So we spend a lot of time with board members looking at how you can use in-kind, use pro bono, how you can use your networks in such a way that it generates resources. And in some cases, we use it as a measure for a member who doesn't necessarily make the $10,000 or $5,000 cut, but their in-kind actually translates to real dollar value to the organization, and sometimes bringing expertise. One quick mention, the Veterans Program was triggered out of, we have a Veterans Program, but linked with a national basis by getting a major ad agency to provide pro bono support in terms of the communications, doing sound bites, raise the level of recognition to a broader audience that triggered a lot more resources coming in. So we got funding to support initiatives just through a pro bono door going through a board member. And that's measurable.
Thank you. And I would add that when I work on measurement with companies and with any program, 5 needs to tie to number 1. So what you're measuring in terms of measuring the results in terms of the value to the company and better world, better community, value to the candidates you've placed needs to tie in with what were your goals in the first place. So that's really critical. Exactly. Final comments, please. Grace, we'll start with you. Just one thought.
Sure. I'll expound on the initial thought that I expressed earlier, where part of the due diligence process, or the due diligence process is exceedingly important to make that right match. What do I mean by that? I think a lot of candidates will just meet the executive director, get a sense of the organization, and that might be all that he or she may do. I would encourage you to tell your employees to go a few levels deeper if they can. Not only meet the board chair, but extra board members, but try to meet some senior staff. Get a sense of what the programs are like. Spend a day volunteering with the organization, and you'll learn a lot more from that than just really talking to a single person who's just going to have one point of view. I learned a lot before I actually sat down with Jillian and decided to join the board. I went on a truck ride through the city, picking up and rescued food through a number of on a truck at a number of different locations around the city, and learned what it actually takes to run the organization. Little things like that are actually very meaningful in discovering what the organization does on a day-to-day basis. I would encourage your employees to go those few steps further.
Thank you. I would say one thing that comes to mind is, to the extent you have a matching program and you come across a nonprofit that also has a clear recruitment strategy and there isn't quite a match, stay in touch, because there will always be opportunity. And speaking for City Harvest, we want to stay in touch with you, because we have a clear recruitment strategy. If we can't make the match right now, we may be able to a year from now. And so we're looking to help your corporation engage within the community through an organization like Carolyn's or City Harvest. And let's find ways to stay in touch, because that right match will come up. It won't be instant. And to continue Grace's theme earlier, it is a bit of a courtship. There's no reason just to walk away if it's not working the first time.
And I agree with that. It's a courtship, and it's really important to be clear about the expectations and have a real recruitment process. Not only recruiting, but also an orientation process. You have to have all of that and meet multiple people in the organization, because you are courting. You know, you're establishing a relationship, and it's an important one. So you got to be clear about what the expectations are, have a process, and require everyone have a visit, you know, with the program. Go see a site, do something that helps you to understand what is the result of the work that's being, you know, accomplished by that organization. And the best way to do that is be out there, and then you can see the connection.
Thank you. I want to ask you to join me in thanking this fantastic panel. And thank you to all of you, and for fabulous questions and comments, and to CECP, and it's been a great pleasure.